Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Soo Han, Director of Orchestral Studies at Baldwin Wallace Conservatory of Music, and a member of the Board of Directors for the Midwest Clinic. In an ongoing effort by the Midwest Clinic to support our teachers and directors doing heroic work during these very difficult times, we are so proud to present a series of online clinics that we hope will be of use to you with your ensembles and your students in the classroom. Today, we are so proud and honored to welcome an incredible director from Australia, Ingrid Martin, to share with us some innovative ideas in working with students and ensembles in a virtual format. Ingrid Martin's work as a conductor, clinician, and curator is united by her vision to transform lives through the emotive power of music. Ingrid is currently the artistic director of the Victorian Youth Symphony Orchestra, Bayside Chamber Orchestra, and Crosswinds Ensemble. She maintains a busy freelance schedule delivering workshops for ensembles and around the country, of course, when not in lockdown. Ingrid is a founder of conductingartistry.com, an online learning platform designed to provide accessible, convenient, ongoing professional development for conductors worldwide through articles, courses, workshops, books, and podcasts. She has served as state president of the Australian Band and Orchestra Directors Association and has both presented and conducted at the Midwest Clinic. She completed her master's degree at University of Minnesota under Craig Kirchhoff and holds bachelor's degrees in medicine and surgery from Monash University. Links to her website, as well as a very generous amount of resources, will be made available in the description section of this presentation. And finally, on a personal note, I've had the privilege of meeting Ingrid last year when doing some work in Melbourne, Australia. Not only is she an accomplished artist and an educator, but she's incredibly humble, down-to-earth individual. And she's just one of those individuals that you feel like you've been friends for so many years the moment that you meet her. Ingrid, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much, Soo Han, and thank you for that very generous introduction. I felt the same way when we met in person last year.
Terrific. Well, it's our honor to have you here. To get our session started, as a place to start, can you please share with us your philosophical approach to teaching and directing that informs your work when you're working with your students and when helping teachers become better at what they do?
I think the most central idea to my teaching philosophy is to empower people, whoever it is that we're working with, whether it be elementary school musicians or an 80-year-old musician in a community ensemble, that everyone is doing music because they want the opportunity to connect and have a voice and be heard. And anything that we can do in our rehearsals to help empower people and help them feel like they have a safe place to express themselves, whether that be through their instrument or singing or through another type of contribution, that everyone has a place that they can do that.
Absolutely. So well said. So now that we have the macro vision and philosophy of your work, let's zoom in. Let's talk details and the tangible things that we can do as teachers and directors. So we know that worldwide COVID is still very real. And in most situations, we're still teaching in an online virtual format. What are some ideas and approaches that you have when it comes to running an online ensemble class or rehearsals?
Thank you, Sue. Well, again, like colleagues all over the world, we're now in this crazy uncharted territory, and all of us have been experiencing this world of online rehearsals at different times over the last almost 12 months now. for us in Melbourne, Australia, we were in a very hard lockdown for most of 2020 and spent about 9 months doing online rehearsals. And I know that for other people, that timeline has been different around the world, but we're all in this place of trying to translate what we were doing in person, that many of us are very highly trained at doing, very experienced at doing, and we know how to do very well, and being thrown into this completely different situation and asking ourselves this question, what now? How do I translate and make what I know work in this completely different context? And how can I best serve my students in this really unprecedented time? And I think what we need to do, and this has been my approach over the last nearly year now, is coming back first of all to the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? And as I articulated earlier, for me, it's really about empowering musicians to have a voice, to learn how to better articulate themselves, their ideas, and how they feel through music, but also through conversation. Music is really the vehicle through which I think we are enriching people's lives in a much broader way. And if we think back to our journey as educators, we can scroll back, and for some of us it might be a few years, and some it might be many years, to why we got here in the first place as educators. And the reason I think most of us, if not all of us, are here is because something magical happened to us in a musical experience. And hopefully that's happened to us many times, but something tipped off a spark in our lives, of whether it was playing in an ensemble or singing in an ensemble or going to an incredible performance. Something moved us about music in a way that nothing else did. And it moved us so much that we decided, hey, I want to do this as my career, and I want to help other people have that kind of experience. And that's our why. That's why we chose to be here as educators and conductors in music. And that is a great starting place, because when we think about that why, even though right now we're in this situation where we can't make music in the way that we normally do, that just thinking about that why is probably going to put us in a more positive frame of mind and feel good and remember, oh yeah, that's what music was about for me. So we want to start with that why, and then think about the new how, whatever that is for you. Maybe it's, I'm in a hybrid rehearsal situation. I've got some students on video conferencing and I've got others in person, socially distanced in the room with me. Maybe it's, I have my entire program is all online, all virtual. Maybe I don't even get to do live classes. Maybe everything I do has to be pre-recorded. There's such a wide variety of situations that people are teaching in right now in this online environment. But if we take your why of why you're here teaching and loving music, and couple that together with whatever is the context that you're working in and the medium and the platform through which you're teaching right now, then that is going to help us get to the what. Like, what am I actually going to do with my students? And for me, over the last year, I was really thinking about, well, why am I here? What is a rehearsal for? What is music for? Why am I doing this with my students? And some of the things that I came up with was, well, we want our students to be connected with each other. That's one of the great joys of ensemble music making that, you know, we are missing in that particular way right now. But there are many ways that we can continue to forge and strengthen connections between our students that are actually optimized using this online platform. The second thing that was part of my why was connecting the musicians with the music itself, and music being a medium for people to express things in ways that they might not before, whether that be from the point of view of us performing the music, but also understanding what was a composer expressing through music, and getting a deeper understanding of music through looking at through the eyes of the composer and the ears of the composer. And so through those two ideas of connecting students with each other and connecting students with the music, and I think connecting students with themselves as well, being able to have a deeper self-awareness and self-understanding through music, also something that happens all the time in our rehearsal rooms, that those three ideas have really informed what I've been doing in an online space. And so as a result, it doesn't look anything like how a rehearsal would look in person. Mm-hmm. It's not me conducting to a screen. It's not students necessarily sitting and playing their ensemble parts. The process of a rehearsal has completely changed as a result of this. And it's helped me have so many different creative ideas about what rehearsal could be about and for, both now in this online context and moving forward to when we go back to in person, that there are so many things I would never have considered that now I'm thinking, oh, well, these things actually help us connect with each other and music and ourselves. And I've just been having a great time amongst the struggle, which is very real, of COVID, of coming up with innovative and creative ideas for what we can do in our online rehearsals. So you asked before for some specific examples. So here are a couple, and the title of this slide, You Know What You Could Do, comes from a game that I love to play with my wife, who's also a musician, and we love having crazy ideas and bouncing them back and forth. So some of the things that we want to help our students do in our normal rehearsals are listening skills, practice skills, improvisation and composition skills, ensemble skills, and hopefully connecting with others, because I think one of the biggest joys and purposes of music is to share it with others and to spread that impact. You know, that's why we, again, became educators and why we perform ourselves, because we want to share the joy of music with other people. So one activity that you could do for listening skills for your students is to get them to map someone else's part. So if you've got digital copies of the music, you can get them to either choose themselves or randomly select to give them the part of another student. And for them to all together in the room be, for example, listening to a recording, or they can have a go at playing along someone else's part if it's in the right clef for them, and to write some emojis on the music. What do they think is the feeling of this part? Let's say you're a cello player and you get the viola part. Well, what do you think is the feeling of the viola part at measure 67 here? And we know students love emojis. They're living in the world of text. To draw emojis across, or they can do it on a sheet of paper. What is the emotional trajectory of another person's part? So when they do get to playing their part, they're now also consciously aware of someone else's part, which may be similar or different to theirs. So this expanding their listening to be aware of someone else's part, but also looking at through an expressive lens. And you'll notice that on all of these activities, I've got a way of us sharing or assessing, because one of the biggest challenges for us is we have lost the concert, and the concert was such a goal for all of us. And, you know, even the most, philosophically kind of reverent of us who are all about the process can so easily get sucked into the primacy of the concert.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about the concert, and everything is, taking us towards this moment that then is just gone.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have a traditional concert to do now. So we're obviously all asking ourselves as educators, how am I going to assess my students? And also, how can I provide something that my students can share to demonstrate their learning? So you could share images or PDFs of the maps of the different emojis. You could record or have students write down their observations of what they learned and what they discovered in this process. And if they're working on the music of a living composer, there's been so much fabulous flexible ensemble music that has come out as a result of COVID by many amazing living composers. Share with the composer. I know lots of friends who are composers who I know would love to see, a student's map of, this is what I think is going on in the bass clarinet part in Frank Ticheli's Vesuvius, for example. The next activity is about practice skills and healthy feedback. One of the biggest challenges, I think, for us as musicians is we spend a lot of time detecting errors. And we ourselves have often been trained to perceive our own practice in that way. And it's something that we tend to unconsciously pass on to our students, that as soon as the sound has finished, the first thing that comes out of our mouth is what was wrong. Mm-hmm. And we've all experienced this as conductors when people come up to you after an amazing performance and apologize for the one note they got wrong. And you think, but all of those thousands of amazing notes that you just played and the incredible music that you made, and it was so moving, and your brain is concentrating on that one wrong note. And for many people, that can kind of destroy the whole experience. So this activity is using a fabulous tool called I Like, I Wish, I Wonder, and asking students to ask themselves that question every time they put down their instrument or they stop singing, to say something they liked. So it might be, I liked the way I played the whole note in bar 5. It sounded really nice. I wish I played the rhythm more accurately in bar 27. And I wonder what would happen if I played with more dynamic contrast. Whatever it might be. So just asking these 3 questions every time, and being the challenge that we are retraining our brain to start with something positive, to recognize the positive. And what that's going to do for our students is build an unconscious association that every time I finish playing, I did something good. Mm-hmm. When so often, unconsciously, it can be the opposite. And what I did for my students online was just create a Google form that they constantly had a link to, and they could just fill that in super quickly, just 3 little things, and click submit. And then, because of the magic of Google Forms or whatever, you could be using a Microsoft product, that you can get a list of all the times that students have filled out that form when they've played. You could do it in your rehearsal, you can get them to do it in their private practice, and you could start a tally. Oh, well, Sue has submitted the form 7 times this week. Sue is on our leaderboard right now for the Healthy Feedback Challenge. Or, the flute section, they are leading it right now. They have done 27 I Like, I Wish, I Wonder observations. Clarinets, you're right behind them. You're on 25. Do you think you can give us 2 more? So again, building that sense of connection and camaraderie, which we can do with lots of different activities.
Absolutely. Ingrid, I'm going to map out your presentation so far with an emoji. You're doing terrific. What I love about the I Like, I Wish, I Wonder is going back to your philosophical approach, that those terms are so much more safe and inviting, and it's non-threatening. And I'm so inspired to steal that from you. And I think I'm going to be using it in my rehearsals whether it be with my college students or my professional ensembles. So thank you so much for that. You're doing awesome. Please tell us more. Keep going.
So with the I like, I wish, I wonder, I actually also in person have that just printed out on a sheet that sits in all of the folders. So at any point in the rehearsal, you can call on that and say, okay, we're going to do I like, I wish, I wonder. And you can do that as a turn and talk to the person next to you. I think one of the great things about this whole era is the use of technology. And I know, every school has different rules when they're in person about how students use technology and phones and tablets and computers. But I'm excited about thinking of if a student has their device with them in a rehearsal, that I can get them to do that online now, which again, we can kind of have more tangible records that are able to be shared. Rather than, being written or just verbal. Right. Another activity that we can do to kind of encourage creativity, which is again part of students having a voice and feeling like they can express themselves through music, is to get them to make a soundtrack to something. And this was something I actually did myself completely on a whim, disconnected to working with students. I was doing an online course and there was a poet in the course, and one of their poems really spoke to me. And I just decided, I wonder if I could do a sort of spoken word performance of this poem and put some music with it. And, it was using a melodica, which was the closest instrument I had to hand, and some body percussion and some vocalization. So not necessarily using their primary instrument that they might be playing in your ensemble, but just getting students to have a tangible experience with sound. And often music can be so abstract for students. And I know even for me, as someone who's been doing music for a very long time, it can be challenging to work out what music is expressing or what a composer is trying to express. And so having something a bit more concrete to hang their hat on can be useful for students if they're experimenting with making their own music for the first time. So starting with a poem, or it could be a paragraph of text. You could collaborate with the English department of your school to say, what is a text that the students are studying in class? Or it might be a line from a Shakespeare play that they're doing, with their drama teacher, to find a little thing that could be recorded by our students or by students, in another faculty, and then to make a soundtrack. And again, this can be a collaborative experience. It doesn't have to, it could be students on their own if that's what your situation allows for. Soundtrap is a fabulous piece of software that I used to do this activity with my youth orchestra. And in the space of, an hour and a half, we had created 10 little compositions with people using all sorts of crazy things that were available to them in their own space at home, to create these hilarious, some of them very deep, little, 30-second to 1 minute compositions that were really easily able to be shared and say, look, we made this. And I think for students to have that experience of, I made something, is really precious in this time when they can't say, I made a concert. Right. And this improvisation and composition process, I think, gives, again, students so much agency and empowerment over how they are making music and what they are doing. And it gives them that perspective of the composer. So after I did this with my youth orchestra, they said, I have a completely different understanding now of what it is to compose and to choose one note over the other. And it makes it have meaning for me to play the right notes, because I know that that was a really deliberate choice, or that, that note is a whole note tied to a quarter note, not just a whole note and stop. That was a deliberate decision. So they have now, again, they've experienced it from that composer's point of view. So, and all know in this crazy world that we're living in, that the experience of seeing something from someone else's point of view can only be beneficial right now.
Right. Well said.
With our emojis, one of the things that we have to do when we're in ensembles, and especially when we're on a Zoom call, is we have to be able to see expression in other people. And we know from research that people can be shown videos of pianists in a piano competition, and they can predict who the winner is going to be with the sound off.
Wow.
Based purely on the visual expression of their musicianship. And so this is a little fun activity. I don't have a face mask at my desk here, but maybe we can stop sharing and you and I can do it together, Sue.
Okay.
So if you go down to your little reactions at the bottom of Zoom, you can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little possible reactions here. And when I do this with students, we can have a sheet with a few different emojis on it. So can you grab something that can kind of act as your mask here if you don't have a mask with you? I'm going to use this piece of paper here.
Okay. We'll do the same.
Okay, so I want you to pick one of those emojis, and I want you to show me with your face which emoji it is.
Okay.
Is it the surprised one?
It is a surprise. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I would get you to ask me why I thought it was that one.
Why did you think it was a surprise one?
Well, I thought, Sue, that it was a surprise one because your eyebrows were up. And looking at the other ones, I didn't think that would be the same with what was going on with your eyebrows and your eyes, even though I couldn't see your mouth.
Right.
And so, if students don't guess correctly, then they can have this dialogue about what makes different expressions communicate different things. And this can be really beneficial when they get back to the whole class. So you can do this with everyone. You can do it with breakout rooms, small groups, pairs, that, when we get back to playing a piece of music, maybe you've done the map and you know what the emotional map of the piece is, that students can say, oh, well, we know that this part in the music is, maybe there's a deceptive cadence. They don't even need to know that that's what it is, but that there's this moment of surprise in the music, and that they can amplify what's going on in the sound because, we know that is an important part of the visual communication of our music making.
This is so
that's students, again, love it.
This is so timely that you're talking about this, because I'm currently working my way through this book called Atomic Habits. And the book is just talking about the chapters that I read, how much our brain is involved in understanding and interpreting visual cues. It's the biggest senses that we have to process in our mind, and how important that is. So this is so timely that you mentioned that. Thank you.
I'm reading a book at the moment called The Body Keeps the Score, which is all about trauma and the way that trauma is embedded in the body as well as in the mind and the emotions. And that is also echoing what you said about the fact that we communicate so much non-verbally, and so much is held in our body that we may not even be aware of. And so as musicians, we're in the emotions business. Absolutely. Of sharing emotions with people through music, that, if we can be more aware of what we're doing physically, that's only going to help our students and our audiences. And it also might help if we're teaching on a Zoom call that we, don't have quite so much of that going on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great. I believe you had one more ideas for us about some tangible activities.
So one final activity that you could do is to reach out to your community. And there are lots of different ways that we can do this. But one part of our community that is really suffering right now are people in aged care facilities, because they're so isolated. Often they can't have any in-person visitors. That making some kind of a connection with anyone, but particularly with young people, would be so valuable to them in this time, which is, really quite a dangerous time for people, as we know, in aged care facilities. So, connecting with your local place and maybe making some pen pals between your students and the aged care facility to just introduce themselves, again, have the opportunity to connect with another person and ask them about what has music been in your life? What does music mean to you? How does music help you in your day-to-day life? Do you listen to the radio? Do you listen to CDs? I think students would be, fascinated to discover the breadth and variety of people's musical interests beyond just, their high school band or orchestra. They might meet Joe, who's, his favorite artist is Led Zeppelin. They might have pegged Joe for being a Brahms fan. But to experience what music means to other people, and then to, share a little musical exchange. Maybe the student can go and find a Led Zeppelin piece to play on the clarinet for Joe. Or, what's your favorite song? Maybe I can find a way that I can share that with you. Or I could teach you about deconstructing the song and giving you a bit more background information. That, this is really music as service, and I think brings a real world meaning and element to our students that can sometimes be lost if we're just sort of doing a project because, we need an assessment for the students to do. That this is, you're actually doing something for somebody else, and you are getting that amazing feeling of connecting with someone and giving a gift to somebody else through music.
Absolutely. Ingrid, goodness, where have you been all my life? This is terrific. I'm incredibly inspired, and I've already come up with 24 things that I would like to steal and incorporate in my teaching and my rehearsals. Thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
Now that we've talked a lot about just tangible details and the things that we can actually do as teachers, let's move beyond teaching music and running rehearsals. And you've actually done a little bit of that already. What are some things that we can do to keep our students engaged and connected with us, but probably more important, connected and engaged with one another, and keeping our community strong when we are not able to be with one another?
I think one of the things I've discovered through this time that has most helped students or musicians connect with each other, and for me to connect with them better, is to just get to know each other better. Mm-hmm. This is such an incredible opportunity for us to more deeply know our students. Mm-hmm. And what I have found through things that, if I looked at it with my teacher rubric, quantitative hat on, I would say, oh, that's a waste of time. But what I have discovered through doing these activities is this has completely transformed the relationship between the students in the ensemble, transformed my understanding of them as students, and so deepened the trust within the ensemble. One of the great things about video conferencing that is so different to being in an in-person rehearsal is everyone can see everyone else's face. And it might seem like something simple, but I had a timpanist in my youth orchestra say, well, I didn't know who anyone was before because I only saw the back of their head. And now I know who everyone's face is. I know what instrument they play. I know their name. And I feel like I'm connected with these people in a different way. And that was purely from the proximity and the spatial arrangement of an ensemble being how it is, that, you know, the people at the back mostly just see backs of heads, and the people at the front just see us and don't see anyone behind them. So even just the actuality of an online rehearsal itself has changed the dynamic and helped students connect with each other in different ways. But I've done lots of activities that are, again, would on the surface perhaps seem pedagogically irrelevant or questionable, but have deeply changed our relationships. One thing we did in the youth orchestra was institute 2-minute talents. So at the end of every rehearsal, there was a bunch of, 3 people that they were going to have the last 6 minutes of the online rehearsal to share something, whatever it was, with people. And it could be, I'm just showing you this thing, or it could be, I'm going to teach you how to do something. And we had everything from literally ninja skills, a percussionist showing us how they were learning how to do like stick twirling ninja things, to someone who's a sailor and showed us pictures of them sailing their sailboat when they're not in lockdown, to a violist who had taken up programming during lockdown and showed us the password encryption software he'd made, to 2 people in the ensemble completely independently discovering that they have a passion for making 1/16 size miniatures of objects. Like the whole gamut of things. We had a chocolate chip cookie baking masterclass with one of our trombonists, and we all followed along and made cookies together. And these are the things that now when they see each other at a rehearsal in person, whenever that might be, they're like, I know something about you. And you gave something to me. And they're like, oh yeah, Beck, you're the cookie person. And like, oh, those cookies were so good, blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, Stephanie, how are your miniatures going? Mm-hmm. What did you build this week? And people are becoming just so much more closely enmeshed with each other. Each week we started our online rehearsals with just a question. And it started out with me posing the question. And as the ensemble started to take over from me, they were the ones that picked the question. And the question just got handballed around the room. And it might be something as silly as, what would you never put on a pizza? To, something as serious as, well, what was something difficult for you this week? And for us to all be able to share those things together.
I love this so much. I have to tell you that on online format, I belong to a lot of online communities where educators are asking, hey, what are some things that we can do? We just recorded some concerts and things like that. And what are some icebreakers and all these things? And so you had given us a treasure trove of worth of ideas. And so I love it. Thank you. But okay, I know that you actually have one activity that involves some online score reading that incorporates a lot of these ideas that you've mentioned. Can you just tell us a little bit more about this activity? Because I was really intrigued when you were talking about it earlier.
So this activity is really about expanding our musicians' understanding of what a piece of music is. For all of us conductors out there, it might have been a while since we were sitting in an ensemble with that one line of music. We get so used to reading a score and having it all laid out in front of us. But our players and singers have a completely different experience of getting given one very small part of information visually. We're talking about visual learning before, and everything else of the picture they are expected to pick up orally through, listening to the other parts. And so much of our rehearsal time is spent helping musicians become more aware of what's going on in the music and around them, and what their role is and what other people's is. But their perspective, they're at a bit of a disadvantage. I know that when I started conducting, my experience as a player completely changed, because I was looking at every playing experience through the lens of being a conductor. I was sitting there reading a French horn part, but I was thinking about, what is the structure of this piece? Like, is this a sonata form? Is this ABA? What can I tell from my part? And, my ears were on high alert about trying to get as much information as possible. But most of our players haven't had the experience of conducting, or maybe even seeing a score. So in this activity, every student gets a copy of the score, and we start out by just having orientation of, well, what can you see? And getting them to ask questions and answer their own questions. And I remember doing this one time, and, I got a question about, well, why is it woodwind, brass, percussion, strings? Why are they in that order? And why are they top to bottom in pitch? And I didn't exactly know the answer to that. And so that person went off and did some research and came and told us all. So even just that part in itself produced amazing curiosity and inquisitiveness and interesting questions. And then what we do next is students are put into groups, and each group is assigned a section of the piece. And you can set this up on a collaborative spreadsheet, like a Google Sheet, for example. And so you can have all the bar numbers of each section, measure numbers across the top. And down the side of your sheet, you can have whatever you would like the students to uncover about the music. So, you might be very clear about identification. So it might be, who's got the melody? What's the key? Who's got the accompaniment? What are they doing? What are the dynamics? You can be very literal in terms of identifying, but you can also be very abstract of, well, what's the feeling in this section of the piece? You can get them to put those emojis in for, from measure 16 to measure 34. It starts off and then it goes, whatever it might be. So you can choose what things you would like students to focus on. And then you send students off with a recording or multiple recordings and the score. You can eventually do this with them, just the score, but I think if students are unfamiliar with reading a score, it's pretty difficult for students to just take the notation and imagine the sound in their head. That's something we spend our life as conductors trying to get better at. So having a recording or multiple recordings there is just to help them orally understand what they see in front of them. So particularly if you can have your timestamps of those different sections of the music. So Sue, you might go off in a group with Paula and Erin, and we're going to go off and look at measure 16 to measure 34. And you'll have 10 minutes to go and fill out as much of that chart as you can. And you're just going to be focusing on that little section. Mm-hmm. And then we bring everyone back together. And in the space of 10 minutes, we suddenly have a map of an entire piece of music that says who's got the melody throughout the entire piece of music, who's got the accompaniment throughout the entire piece of music, what the dynamic trajectory is, what the emotional trajectory is. And the students have created this map together. And that can be used as a resource for future playing of the piece or practicing their part. If maybe they're doing a recording of their part and they can look and go, oh yeah, well at bar 16, I know that the first violins and the second clarinet have the melody here. That's not me. So I better make sure that I'm playing at the right dynamic level, that turn down my level in recording, and I have to make lots of extra work for him in his multi-tracking. And, you know, if it's in a real life scenario, that I can be aware of what's going on around me. And the response I've had to this activity is ensembles saying, we want to do this for every piece we're going to play from now on, even when we go back in person.
Yeah, bravo. That's so awesome. Great. I can talk to you the entire day. You're full of so many wonderful ideas, but we do all good things have to come to a close. But before we go away, let me just ask you one more question. Your work just doesn't involve in teaching and helping your students, but you're also very committed to helping your colleagues and other fellow music teachers around the world to make sure that they are taking care of themselves and for them to be aware of their own wellness and being. What are some things that you can share with us around this work?
This is a really challenging time for all of us. And I think the first thing for all of us to do is acknowledge that, that it's really challenging. We are being challenged with our identity as educators and musicians, because we can't do what, you know, we hold so strongly to as something that is important to us. So I think the first thing is just recognizing, yeah, this is a hard time, and I'm going to be having a hard time of this during this period, and that's okay, and that's normal. And to, you know, be aware of, you know, those feelings that are coming up, which might be feelings of struggling or feeling hopeless about things. I've had plenty of time feeling like that over the last year, as I'm sure many of us had, being frustrated. We're back in this situation, like our beginner students, of failing a lot. And that's actually really good for learning. But as musicians, we are trained to go for this ultimate perfection all the time. And even just that tiny thing wrong, that one note at the end of the concert, we get upset about. So, you know, when you try something in an online rehearsal and all the kids are, you know, switched off or they're not engaged, you know, that can be very challenging and frustrating for us. And for us to recognize that this is a part of me learning and doing something that I've never done before. And for lots of us, it might be a long time since we did something we'd never done before. Yeah. And we have had so much of that. And that is a lot for our kind of mind and body to process over this period. Right. And so I actually have just on the bottom of my screen here some post-it notes from a blog post that I wrote about this wellness idea of how we need to take care of ourselves. So I've got move, particularly if we're just sitting in our office doing these online things, we've got to find a way to move, whether that's, you know, online yoga, or if you can go outside, going for a walk, being in nature, fresh air, doing a crazy online exercise class. I did a suggestion someone said the other day of, why don't you just put on a random upbeat song and dance for the whole duration of the song? And I felt so good after that 3 minutes. So moving, I think, is really important. Laughing. We haven't had much of that for various reasons. And we kind of have to maybe force ourselves to do that. You know, watch something funny on YouTube. I've been watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? Replays on YouTube and very much enjoying that. Because we know physiologically that like having a big belly laugh is really good for us. I also learned in this trauma thing that I'm reading that the way we move our bodies and the way we hold our bodies sends signals to our brain and our emotions. So, you know, if we're all constantly sitting like this, it's very difficult for us to feel good. But if we're like this, it's very hard to be upset and angry. So if you're watching this right now, you can just give us of these. We can use our body to change our mind, which is amazing. The third thing I have is to listen and listen to music that just makes you feel good. It's not the music you're planning for your next concert. It's not the flex ensemble music that you're investigating to see, would this work for my group? It's just something that you like. And, you know, it doesn't have to be band music or orchestra music or choir music, like just something, you know, maybe you love Lady Gaga, or, you know, maybe you love Queen, whatever it is, just listen to something that makes you feel good. And then we talked about moving, but we also have to pause and be still. And being still is really hard when we're in this state of grief and trauma around this whole time that we're living in. But taking a few minutes to be with our thoughts and feelings and to just slow down and breathe can be really helpful for us. And the last thing is gratitude. Gratitude is like a magic pill. It makes everything feel better. You know, even if you're having the worst day, the most down in the dumps, most terrible online rehearsal you've ever had in your life, and I felt like I had so many of those last year, that there's something to be grateful for. We can find something that we can be grateful for. Grateful that, you know, I can connect with my students, you know, even if they don't seem engaged, at least I can see them in a video conferencing setting. Or, you know, grateful that I'm still here and I'm healthy. Or, you know, grateful that, you know, I'm not in a lockdown where I can't leave the house and I can go outside and breathe some fresh air. Grateful that I can make myself a nice meal. You know, find something to be grateful for amongst all the other stuff that, you know, we wish we could change, but we can only change so much. So knowing what we can control and what we can't control is also really helpful in this crazy time.
Ingrid, that's really moving. You're incredible. I've just learned so much. Again, I could talk and learn from you all day long. I just want to say, on behalf of the Midwest Clinic and on behalf of so many educators and directors that I hope sees this presentation, we thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for your time and your expertise. We're so grateful. If people wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yep. So the best way is through my website, which is www.conductingartistry.com. I'll just put that up on the screen. So conductingartistry.com is my website, and on there are plenty of articles. There's an article that describes the 5 rehearsal activities that we talked about today, as well as an article about the 5 ways to, you know, help yourself reconnect and look after yourself as a director. There are courses, I have live workshops. There's a podcast all about repertoire selection, and you can contact me through there as well. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Conducting Artistry.
Fantastic. So once again, we will also put a link to your website and other resources in the description section of this session. Before we say farewell, Ingrid, I have to ask, tell me a little bit about the painting behind your left shoulder. Who is that gentleman that's been...
This one?
Absolutely, yeah.
This is an Australian rock musician called Nick Cave.
Right.
And this is a gift that was given to me by my mum before I went to Minnesota. She wanted me to have something Australian. It was just on a canvas, and I took it in a roll, and it was up on my wall in my apartment. And then we got Jimi Hendrix over here, and then
I saw him.
A poster from the Elbphilharmonie from Le Grand Macabre, because I got to meet Alan Gilbert at the start of the year, which was amazing. And then I found this poster just a couple of days later. So it was my souvenir.
Well, thank you for sharing your time and your space with us. This has been extraordinary. So Ingrid, again, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. And thank you, and be well, and can't wait to see you once again soon.
Thank you so much, Soo Han, and thank you so much to the Midwest Clinic for providing all of these resources for educators at this very challenging time. We're all so grateful for what the clinic is doing for all of us.
Take care.
Thank you.